I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, Dubai, Dubai World, debt and world debt. The great restructuring is on, but where's the money coming from? Is it enough to keep everyone happy? And does anyone trust Dubai World anymore? It's especially when dodgy dealings are still emerging in the Emirate. The founders of Damas jewellery are struck off and told, give back the cash and the gold. Plus, we look at Britain's record budget deficit. Is Gordon Brown's government doing enough to slash debt? And can it, as a general election looms? So, Dubai, a city with debt problems almost as big as the ambitions which landed it in so much trouble. But now, perhaps, comes the turnaround. At the very least, the city's mega business Dubai World has shown, after so much silence, that it is working through its financial troubles and might just have a plan which will make all sides happy. Before we tell you about it, let's reopen the Dubai diary, remind you of how we got here. It was the 26th of November last year that Dubai World shocked the markets with its request for a 6-month debt freeze on about $60 billion of debt, and then promptly disappeared for the Islamic Eid holiday. Uncertainty reigned until mid-December when neighbouring Emirate Abu Dhabi stepped in and paid off some of the debts. And since then, it's all been behind closed doors, the company and the creditors, with Dubai World coming up with its new repayment plan on the 25th of March. In short, Dubai is promising to pay back all its creditors within 8 years, even going to the lengths of effectively writing off $10 billion of debt by turning it into stock. But it doesn't end there either. The two businesses at the centre of it all, Dubai World and its subsidiary Nakheel, have to get back on their feet, of course. And to do that, Dubai is handing them almost $10 billion, all in all. It is a huge price to pay for the biggest economic boom the Middle East has seen. And remember, there is no more help coming from Abu Dhabi either. Dan Nolan has more.
Green figures on Dubai's financial market can mean only one thing. Investors like what they see in Dubai World's restructuring announcement.
A major cloud, if you want, has moved away at the moment, cleared out. There's no guarantee that there's not going to be some more coming, but I think now that you've set a certain structure by which that you can address even the future ones.
The new proposal includes a commitment from Dubai World and its troubled property arm, Nakheel, to come up with new business plans, as Dubai's government injects another $9.5 billion into them. Nearly $6 billion of that money will be sourced from last year's bailout package provided by Abu Dhabi, the richer but more conservative emirate next door. Both emirates are essentially writing off their debts in Dubai World to ensure the creditors who are owed over $14 billion get paid first. 97 banks will need to accept new payment terms of 5 to 8 years instead of the 3 originally promised. They'll also need to agree on what interest is paid on the longer term.
It has restructured a solution whereby investors can have their money back in a bit longer time, maybe in some cases, but they will have no haircut, which is a positive one.
Contractors who are owed millions by Nakheel for building much of Dubai's skyline will receive an immediate cash payment of $137,000. Dubai World claims that will cover half of all contractors owed. The rest will get a mix of cash and securities. And this is where those creditors who aren't happy with Dubai World's offer will come to pursue legal action. 3 world-renowned bankruptcy and insolvency judges have formed a special tribunal specifically to handle any Dubai World claims.
I suppose the fact we haven't had any claims suggests that at the moment creditors are comfortable with whatever processes are going on behind the scenes, and of course we're not party to that.
Another indication that perhaps Dubai is serious about fixing mistakes of the past is news that a former governor of its entire international banking hub has been jailed pending a fraud investigation. He was removed from his post in November, about the same time as Dubai's debt problems were fully coming to light.
Let's talk more about this now. Joining us from Cambridge in the UK is author Jim Crane. He wrote the book City of Gold, Dubai and the Dream of Capitalism. Jim, thank you for your time. Confidence, such an important word when it comes to Dubai. I wonder if this deal is enough to restore confidence, or if it's maybe just a reshuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic.
No, I think it will improve confidence. You can see that. I mean, in the amount it takes to insure Dubai's debt, which has dropped. So you can see that there's some confidence there. The stock markets are going up, so there is at least some temporary confidence, until the next big bombshell. But But I don't think it's going to regain, you know, the pre-crash levels where Dubai, you know, state-linked companies could borrow whatever they wanted, and it would be considered sovereign debt. I think those days are past. So you know, confidence levels have improved, but they haven't recouped all their losses.
So the damage has been done already, basically. The way this was handled back in November, the way it wasn't handled before November, it's all left Dubai with too much damage done to be in the place it was before all of this, you think?
That's right. Yeah, I mean there's some really big damage to Dubai's financial reputation and to that of its ruler, by the way that this was all handled and by the sort of murky nature that the details were leaked out and the, you know, the true extent of the financial problems were withheld from the public. You know, it just caused investors to really assume the worst, take the worst case scenario, you know, which, you know, may or may not have been the case. So it, you know, a little bit more sunlight on some of these problems would have probably saved Dubai a bit of some of these headaches.
So lessons learned then, 4 months later, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the city is showing a little bit more openness. I mean, you can see that with this Hamas hit that took place there, you know, a few weeks back. The city's been very open about that. So less so about its financial dealings, but maybe, you know, there might be a little bit of atonement, perhaps, given what we see coming out of Dubai now. So let's hope for a bit more of that.
Yeah, let's hope indeed. Jim Crane there joining us from Cambridge. Thank you. And maybe we will see some more of that transparency, especially after Dubai's financial regulator made a real example of another big company, Damas Jewellers, after some very dodgy dealings came to light there. The official term was an unauthorised transaction, but in layman's terms, it was just 3 executives stealing millions of dollars in cash and gold from the company. And the D word popped up again. Damas happens to be in talks with its creditors to reschedule $871 million worth of debt. Once again, from Dubai, Dan Nolan.
With 450 stores spread across 18 countries, Damas is a jewellery empire that's now been rocked to its core by financial scandal. Just months after Damas raised hundreds of millions of dollars by listing on Dubai's stock exchange, 3 of its executives were found to have taken nearly $100 million in cash, plus 2 tons of gold, valued at $70 million.
Really very simple. They took out the money, invested it, and were planning later to probably pay it back. But with the changes, as we all know, in the world economy, some of these probably investments were not as successful.
Paul Costa heads the Dubai Financial Services Authority, the regulatory body that has ordered Damas to dismiss its entire board. It's also handed out $3.7 million in fines and imposed a 10-year ban to the men who took the money, the high-profile Abdullah brothers, from running any Dubai-based companies. Dubai's regulator got involved after a whistleblower blew the lid on some of the Abdullah brothers' unauthorised transactions. At the time, one of the brothers was both CEO and managing director of Damas. Damas has a new CEO and will soon have a new board as it also tries to restructure over $1 billion in debt. The Abdullah brothers have been ordered to repay the cash and gold to the company their grandfather started over a century ago and have learned a painful lesson as Dubai tries to clean up its image.
Clearly the authorities have said we want to be more transparent. There is a crackdown on corruption, and we play our role in that. And I think there is a message that Dubai will make changes.
Financial analysts say the move is long overdue in an emirate where under-the-table dealings have helped fuel the economy.
So it's a positive step forward, but I think it's a shock for a lot of people because the economy here in many ways still depends on these more nefarious ways to make money.
There's also concern that with the high proportion of family-controlled corporations in Dubai, Damas's dodgy dealings could be the first of many.
And when counting the cost returns yet more from Dubai, we'll show you what money can apparently still buy. It is quite simply the biggest, best and costliest racecourse in the world. And Europe throws debt-ridden Greece a lifeline, or at least a safety net. The details on that and more when we return. Welcome back to Counting the Cost, your weekly business stop here on Al Jazeera. With an election just around the corner in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Gordon Brown has everything to do to convince the public that he is the man who can turn around a stagnant economy. Now, he should be the man. After all, Gordon Brown was Finance Minister for more than a decade. But he's also blamed for a lack of control over the financial district and for the economic blight that unleashed. Take a look, because Britain spent billions bailing out its banks, some estimates as high as 850 billion British pounds, which at today's rate is around 1.27 trillion US dollars. Overall debt is, believe it or not, on a par with Greece, $170 billion, or a record 12% of the size of its economy. And that flows on in an international sense, because overseas investors have been selling their British pounds amid concerns about the debt. And now comes the really hard part for Gordon Brown, because there's no money to pay for tax cuts, which is a sure way of winning votes. Thousands of jobs could go in the civil service, and strikes are becoming the norm, including those very civil servants, as well as transport workers and, of course, British Airways. Alan Fisher has more from London.
The traditional photo call, the traditional red box, but this was not a traditional budget. With just weeks before an election, it was highly political. For Finance Minister Alistair Darling, it was about highlighting the differences between the ruling Labour Party and the opposition Conservatives.
I know there are some demanding immediate cuts to public spending, and I believe that such a policy would be both wrong and it would be dangerous. To start cutting now risks derailing the recovery, which is already bringing down borrowing more rapidly than was expected.
The most pressing task, cutting Britain's deficit. At 12.6% of GDP, it's the third worst in the world after Iceland and Greece. The government wants to halve it in 4 years. To help small businesses promote innovation and invest, the government will introduce a one-off $3.7 billion growth package. And it intends to get all taxpayer money back from the banks. A 50% tax on bank bonuses has already raised more than $3 billion. And a boost for the housing market with the waiving of a one-off purchase tax for first-time buyers on properties worth up to $376,000, but paid by lifting taxes on homes sold worth over $1.5 million, a move which would appeal to Labour's core voters. Mr Darling says Britain is doing better than expected.
Global recession has not turned into depression. Unemployment here in the UK has not risen as much as was feared. Borrowing, as I will explain later, is lower than forecast last year.
In the House of Commons, the opposition leader dismissed Labour proposals as too little, too late.
Today, the biggest risk to our recovery is 5 more years of this Prime Minister.
But one independent pollster says the Conservatives face a struggle to convince voters that they'd handle the economy better.
What we've seen is an intensely political budget. It's much more politics than economics, and really a mark of the campaign to come. Plenty in it for Labour's core voters, try and put the Conservatives on the back foot, and also raise the stakes in terms of politicising the campaign around some of the sort of seedier, grubbier elements that promise to make this quite a dirty campaign.
The election is now at the most 6 weeks away. The politicians will argue and debate about the measures announced here, but the people will decide who is right.
All right, let's see if we can really see what state the British economy is in light of that budget. Ian Begg joins us now from London. He's a professor at the London School of Economics. Thank you for your time. So we know the job of any finance minister in his or her budget is to convince the voters that they're doing the right job, their policies are the right ones. In an election year, though, it changes completely. Do you think that Alistair Darling did enough to convince the British voters that they are on the right track and should in fact stay on that track?
I think he had a very astute budget, both politically and economically, because he avoided the very obvious trap of being seen to engage in a kind of giveaway in which he says, here are some goodies that I'll use to bribe you to vote for me in the election. But he also managed to make a few political points that created dividing lines between the Labour Party and the opposition by saying, here's ways in which we propose to do things which will distinguish us from the others. In particular, some of the distributive policies, such as saying that people on low incomes would be able to buy houses more easily, whereas he would penalise those on very high incomes. That's the kind of dividing line that's very clever in achieving both political and economic ambitions.
But to be fair, he wasn't really in much of a position to be giving away many goodies, as you say, given the state of the British economy.
Well, he did reveal that the public sector deficit was going to be significantly lower than he led us to believe as recently as 3 months ago. It's improved from 178 to 167 billion pound deficit. Now that's still huge, but it did enable him to put together a package of small business measures, for instance, which are seen as being in the interest of long-term growth rather than just election giveaways.
OK then, you will be on another topic well aware, as we all are, of the amount of industrial action going on in the UK, or at least very high profile industrial action, the likes of British Airways. When you look at that, is it really indicative of the economy? I think perhaps if you're looking in from out, as we are, you might question the state of the British recovery when you see those industrial actions going on.
No, I think the recovery is underway, but we're still in that delicate period when things might not improve very rapidly. British Airways is a case on its own because that's a long-standing industrial dispute that even goes back to the days when British Airways was publicly owned. So I think that's not a good example of what's going on in Britain. But there is clearly unrest within the public sector, and the public sector, not surprisingly, sees itself as threatened by the need for expenditure cuts. And therefore it's not surprising that strong unions such as the rail unions are willing to countenance industrial action at this point.
OK, give us a sense, if you could, of the feeling there in London. You've given us great hard information. I wonder about the anecdotal evidence, the way people are talking, better part of 2 years now since this financial crisis began. How are people actually feeling out there in London?
Well, London, of course, is not that representative of the whole of the UK because it's a relatively prosperous area. I don't think you get a strong impression walking around London, speaking to people in pubs, as I occasionally do, that things are going badly. Rather, it's sort of bumping along, and nobody's as badly off as they were in earlier recessions in, say, 1990 or 1980, and nobody feels that it's the end of the world anymore. I think the government has succeeded to that extent in engendering a sentiment that things are gradually going to improve. Now we get on to the different question about how the public sector unwinds its very large contribution to the economy. That's where the next battleground is going to be.
OK, so you say bumping along, enough to possibly bump Gordon Brown back into power come election time? What do you think?
Well, he, I think, is just about winning the economic argument that what he's done is the right thing, and what the opposition party, the Conservative opposition party, has done is out of step with what other countries are up to. In practice, I think both parties, if they were returned to or put in power after the election, would follow more or less the same sorts of strategies: gentle increases in taxes, gentle cuts in public expenditure, and hoping that the recovery takes hold sufficiently to restore the public finances over a 3 to 5 year period.
Ian Begg at the London School of Economics, thank you for joining us. And from Britain to mainland Europe, where the continent has come together, finally, to help out one of its own. We're talking Greece, of course, battling its debt demons while the Eurozone countries decided how they wanted to help and thus avoid going cap in hand to the IMF. It was all led by France and Germany, with the New Deal providing a safety net for Greece should its own cost-cutting measures fall flat.
A deal done, the pressure off, and smiles from two of Europe's biggest powers. After weeks of will they, won't they? They did. And now Greece knows it can secure financial help from Eurozone countries to pay its massive debts. A rescue package they insisted before the meeting was to everyone's benefit.
Of course, today the challenge is a European one. It's a European one for making sure that we fortify the Eurozone, we strengthen the euro currency, and we stabilize the euro currency in the European Union. And in doing so, make sure that this path for Europe is also a prosperous and a stable one.
Angela Merkel made it clear what she wanted.
I've suggested a combination of IMF and bilateral help as a last resort, if Greece can't get any money. I say again, it is a last resort.
And she got it. No direct EU loans, instead individual countries lending directly to Greece, and involvement of the International Monetary Fund. It'll play a big part in the rescue package, but most of the money will come from European nations lending directly to the Greeks. It's being emphasised it will be done at market rates. One EU watcher says the row has damaged the euro and the whole organisation.
It's damaging both the euro and the European Union. If you look at what the debates of the last couple of weeks, in which the debate has deteriorated, has become worse and worse, especially between Greeks and Germans. I think that what that leads to is to an increasing level of distrust, mistrust among member states.
The Greeks will still go to the international markets to raise money to pay off their debts, but if the interest rates are too high, they do now have a plan B, which is what they were always after. The rescue deal is a safety net, so now Greece is no longer looking at falling into a deep, dark hole.
All right, let's return to Dubai now. Why not? And a story we have been following closely for months. And as you will have seen earlier, the man who's helped us do that is Dan Nolan. You'll know his reports. I've worked alongside him myself many times in Dubai. So what I've asked him to do this week is just give us some of his thoughts from a city which, since November, has seen all sorts of ups and downs.
It's been quite a strange 4 months covering Dubai's debt problems since they first fully emerged at the end of November. But perhaps this latest news from Dubai World is going to provide a chance for the whole emirate to draw a line in the sand and move on. There's a general feeling of confidence about this restructure package that's been announced, particularly this cash payment which is going to be made to all the trade contractors who are owed money by Dubai World's property arm, Nakheel. That's the builders, all the people who are making Dubai what it is and who have been waiting for money from Nakheel are now going to get an immediate cash payment of around $130,000. Now that money is not going to just be held by them, it's going to flow through to employees, to shops and other businesses here and really give everyone a kick along. Whether this package that's been announced is going to produce the leaner and meaner Dubai that everyone's been hoping it would come out of this, well, that still remains to be seen. But we do know that they are now going to be much more beholden to the bigger and richer emirate next door, and that's Abu Dhabi.
And just one more thing I want to show you from Dubai, proof, if you like, that dreams do still live there and apparently come true. Check this out, the brand spanking new Meydan racecourse in Dubai, which now hosts the Dubai World Cup, one of the biggest, richest horse races in the world. That grandstand you see there is over 1 kilometre long. It seats 60,000 people, but here's the kicker, it's actually a hotel with 6 fancy restaurants, lovely rooms you can see there, and an IMAX theatre. So you can take a room if you like, or perhaps sit in the rooftop infinity pool and watch the horses go thundering by in the greatest of comfort. The price tag, $2 billion. Debt? What debt? Don't forget counting the cost online. You get there from the programs link at aljazeera.net/English. My weekly blog goes up there along with previous episodes of the show. And as of now, you can also keep up with what's happening on next week's show, plus any tidbits I find online by following us on Twitter. The name to search for is @AJCountingCost. That's it from Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamarie from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.